From Ted Bundy to Jack the Ripper, there are thousands of evil people that exist among us, wreaking havoc on society. We put faith in our authorities and courts to keep us safe, but what happens if they don't get caught? Or worse, they escape. Here's the list of the top 10 evil people who are currently on the loose. Coming in at number 10 is the Colonial Parkway Killer. An active criminal between 1986 to 1989, this person specifically targeted couples traveling Virginia's scenic parkway late at night. During that time, 3 couples were found dead and 1 couple went missing but is presumed to have the same fate. A different couple was found each year, leading authorities to question, was this person only killing once a year, or were this just the ones they found? The cases had received major media coverage, including documentaries, news articles, and TV shows as recent as 2021, but despite having over 130 suspects, the FBI have yet to be able to put a name to the face of the crimes. One bizarre piece of this puzzle is that in 2010, a note was discovered in a box taken years earlier from one of the victims' apartments. The note stated that she was to meet someone in a blue van at a rest stop, and when the Virginia State Police was asked about this, they claimed that the note had been previously examined. But in 1989, during the time of the murders, an investigator involved told case reporters that he was unaware of the existence of the note. So, if you ever find yourself driving the scenic route of Virginia, do yourself a favor and don't make a pit stop. Next up at number 9 is Glen Stewart Godwin. In 1996, this killer was added to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's top 10 most wanted list after he escaped from a California prison back in 1987. At the time of his escape, he was serving a 26 to life sentence for the death of Kim LaValle. Trying to hide the body, took her up a mountain and decided to use a homemade explosive in an attempt to make the remains disappear. However, residents of the mountain only a few months later came across some remains, thus sparking his arrest. When he escaped prison in 1987, he fled to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico and joined up with a cartel, but was found and convicted in 1991 and sent to jail in Guadalajara. It was here that he took the life of a fellow inmate and then escaped a second time only 5 months later. Authorities have yet to track him down after 31 years, but it is believed that he is still on the loose today. So, keep your eyes peeled if you're ever in Latin America, because the FBI is offering a $20,000 reward for anyone with information that could lead to his arrest. Next up at number 8 is Bible John. Active between 1968 and 1969 in Glasgow, Scotland, the man nicknamed Bible John is believed to be responsible for the death of 3 young women. All 3 of his victims were young brunettes who he would lure in at a local dance hall in the city. The unidentified criminal is referred to as Bible John, as according to a key witness, saw a man who picked up women yet quoted extensively from the Old Testament and frowned on adultery. But of course, taking the lives of young women seemed alright in his books. For decades, the Glasgow police have tirelessly searched for the monster, but have remained unsuccessful in tracking him down. To date, the search for Bible John has been the most extensive manhunt in Scotland criminal history. It was also the first time in Scotland's history that a composite drawing of the perpetrator was allowed and publicized in an attempt to get more information from the public. Although there have been a few suspects over the years, none have been convicted, and to this day it is unknown who is responsible for these horrible attacks. Next up at number 7 is the Monster of Florence. Active between 1968 and 1985 in Florence, Italy, this man is responsible for the death of 8 young couples who he would target while they snuck away into the woods trying to be intimate outside of their homes. Now, in 1970s Italy, this could be a common occurrence, as was customary for young couples to not live with each other until marriage, and with nowhere else to go, sometimes the great outdoors was their only alternative. The part about this that really gets under your skin is that the female victims would be found mutilated, with their intimate areas removed with, quote, a surgical precision that led police to believe he had a medical background. More than 100,000 men were investigated for these crimes, with some being arrested or even tried, but eventually another killing would occur, exonerating them and forcing police to continue their search. The search continued for this gruesome monster, and a local farmer named Pietro Pacini was convicted in 1994 for 6 of the killings, but later in 1996 it was overturned. Pacini then died a few years later, but it is strongly believed he did not work alone, and while 5 accused men have been sent to jail at one point or another, they were all eventually released, leaving this case wide open with the alleged convict running free. Coming in at number 6, we have the upstairs lounge fire. In June of 1973, a New Orleans gay bar was the victim of the second worst attack on the American queer community, only surpassed in 2016 by the Pulse nightclub massacre. The upstairs lounge was a beloved hub with drag queens and music, but sadly on this 1973 Pride weekend, everything would change. The bar was located on the 2nd floor of the building, and out of nowhere patrons started to smell gasoline, but initially thought nothing of it. A few minutes later, a doorbell rang, and when someone opened to see who was there, a fireball was thrown into the room and immediately erupted the room into an inferno. It is now known the perpetrator used a Molotov cocktail. The fire burned fast, lasting only 20 minutes, but in that time, 32 lost their lives and another 15 were severely injured by the attack. The survivors of the fire were taken to identify the bodies of those who died in the tragedy, but according to one survivor, many of the identified bodies remained unclaimed by family members as they were ashamed and wanted nothing to do with their gay kin. After the attacks, many survivors refused to show their faces, afraid of the homophobia that would follow due to the media coverage. No arrests were ever made, and it's very likely that whoever committed this atrocity continues to walk the streets of New Orleans to this day. Next up at number 5, the Stoneman. Active between the years of 1985 to 1988 in Mumbai, India, this mysterious criminal was never caught. Believed to be responsible for the death of 26 people, the Stoneman got their name due to their cruel methods. The Stoneman would target homeless people sleeping alone on the streets at night and used concrete blocks or stones, sometimes weighing up to 65 pounds to carry out their gruesome plan. According to the media, 12 people died at the hands of the Stoneman in Mumbai, India between 1985 to 1988, and then they moved to Calcutta where another 12 people were found dead in a single year. Now, it's not known for sure if the Calcutta killer was the same as whoever committed the atrocities in Mumbai. Authorities did mention it could have been a copycat, but most seem to believe it was all one person, or at least a group of people working together. No one has been charged for any of the crimes, and all remain unsolved. Coming in at number 4, the Doodler. This next criminal was from San Francisco and active for just 1 year between 1974 to 1975. However, in that year, the unidentified killer is believed to have taken 16 lives. He was known to target specifically white men in gay clubs and got his name as he was known to sit around doodling pictures of them to draw them in. Once they got to talking, he would lure them elsewhere, like a lake or a park, and follow through with the rest of his evil plan. Unfortunately, due to the rampant homophobia of the time, when police did find a suspect for the case, they couldn't proceed with criminal charges, as none of the 3 surviving victims of the brutal attacks felt safe to out themselves publicly by testifying in court, fearful of how the consequences might impact their daily lives. The case remains open with no known suspect of who committed the crimes, and in 2019 the police offered a $100,000 reward to anyone with more information of the killer. Next up at number 3, the Craigslist Ripper. Also known as the Long Island Killer, this man is thought to be responsible for the death of 17 people between the years of 1996 to 2010, and got his name as he was known to target women of the night who advertised their services on Craigslist. Although his crimes began in 1996, none of his victims were found until 2010, many wrapped up in sacks or garbage bags along the Long Island shore. It's speculated that he may have been, or that he currently is, a police officer, as whoever committed these crimes seemed to have an in-depth knowledge of the investigation techniques not typically known by just anyone. Sadly, of the 17 found, only 5 have been able to be properly identified due to the nature of how he left the bodies. Coming in at number 2, the Zodiac Killer. Possibly the most famous repeat convict known to date, this criminal is as scary as it gets. Active in California during the late 60s and early 70s, the Zodiac Killer seemed to get off on the chase, sending in letters and highly encrypted clues to the police that supposedly would reveal his identity and more, if only the puzzles could be deciphered. Not only would he send in cards to the police, but he was known to mail in his taunting clues to local newspapers, threatening awful consequences if they were not printed. There are 7 known victims that he is known to be responsible for, 2 surviving his brutal attacks, although he claims to have killed 37. The especially creepy part about this particular monster is that, as detailed in his letters, he believed that all those whose life he ended would become his slaves in the afterlife, and that he would be sent to paradise. Although the Zodiac ceased all written communication by 1974, the case remained open since 1969, with no known perpetrator. And last up in our number 1 spot, Issei Sagawa. Nicknamed the Kobe Cannibal, this monster is not for the faint of heart. Now, unlike others on the list, he's only known for one brutal attack, but what he did will leave you speechless. Sagawa was born in Japan and says he had known since childhood of his gruesome instincts, but for whatever reason would always back out of his desires at the last second. All of this changed, however, when he moved to Paris to pursue his PhD. It was there that he met Renee Hartvelt, one of his classmates who he decided was the right victim. Sagawa says he picked her due to her beauty and stature, as he saw himself as weak, ugly, and small, and believed that he could absorb her energy. He invited her over on the pretense of a dinner, but knew all along what he planned to do. He had it thought out. He took the woman's life, and I'm sure you can imagine what he did with her body, considering the monster's name. After 4 days, the body began to decompose, and he knew that he had to get her out of his apartment or risk being arrested for his crimes. However, he was caught attempting to dispose of her remains in a nearby lake by French authorities and was, of course, arrested immediately. After awaiting trial for 2 years, a judge ruled him legally insane and unfit for trial, ordering him to live out the rest of his life in a mental institution. He was deported out of France and sent back to Japan, where he was immediately committed. But here's where it gets crazy. Once in this institution, the psychologist deemed him fully sane, and that his perversions were the reason for his crimes, not insanity. But since his charges had been dropped while in France, all documents were sealed and nothing was sent to Japanese authorities, meaning that legally, the institution could not detain him any longer. After only 2 years away from society, Sagawa walked out freely and remains free to this day. As always, thanks for watching, guys. My name is Kennedy, and if you enjoyed this, make sure to hit that subscribe button.